What's up, students? I'm Mr. Inshanali and welcome back to my social studies classroom. Last class we looked at different family types. Well, today's class we will be focusing on the basic types of union found in the Caribbean, as well as differentiating amongst the forms of marriage. First things first, we will be looking at different terms and definitions. What is marriage? Well, marriage is the legally recognized union of two people as partners in a personal relationship. Historically, and in some jurisdictions, specifically a union between a man and a woman. And of course, in Guyana and in the Caribbean, we recognize a marriage as a legal union between a man and a woman. However, in places like the USA, you find that same-sex marriages are allowed because that's another jurisdiction. I also want you to remember that marriage is a legally recognized union. That means if you do not have a marriage certificate, if it's not legally recognized, then you are not technically married. Another term we'll be looking at is legal separation. And legal separation is the legal procedure by which a married couple remains legally married while living apart. If two persons have decided that the marriage is not working out and they want to get a divorce, sometimes the first step would be to be legally separated. So they go to the courts, and then the judge is going to decide what is going to happen next. And the courts will be able to give both parties or tell both parties what are their rights and their responsibilities while being legally separated. But let us not confuse legal separation with a divorce. Both are different, and as such, we will now define the term divorce. So now we'll be looking at the term divorce, and divorce is the legal or formal dissolution of a legally constituted marriage. Of course, you cannot have a divorce without being legally married. So if you're legally married and you decide that you don't want to live together with each other and there's no hope of the relationship being better, then both parties can decide to have a divorce. Now we will be looking at basic types of unions in the Caribbean. And the first union we'll be looking at has to do with a legal marriage. A legal marriage. And I use those terms specifically because sometimes people are together and they say they're married, but technically, legally, they are not married. So what is a legal marriage? Well, this union is formed through a legal contract between two consenting adults. This union is formed through a legal contract. What do we mean? Well, you as a married person must be in possession of a marriage certificate. You must apply for a marriage certificate. So if you have intentions of being legally married, if two persons decide that they want to be legally married, then they go to the General Registrar's office in Georgetown, they apply for a marriage license, and they can get legally married. Or they publish bans or they give notice, and the religious leaders will marry them. And again, they must sign a document in order for them to get their marriage certificate. So that is what a legal marriage is all about. And it may or may not include a religious ceremony. So if two persons told you they got married and you did not get invited to a wedding, do not say, oh, they're lying or they weren't married. No. They could be married because they signed a legal document. So a marriage or a wedding ceremony is not necessary. This type of marriage, like we said, can only be ended by a divorce because you're legally married. It can only be ended by a divorce. And divorce must not be confused with an annulment. That's a big term. What does annulment means? Well, an annulment means that the courts will not recognize your marriage in the first place. So technically, you were not really married. And as such, the courts will determine the marriage or declare the marriage to be null and void. In what cases would you have an annulment? Well, for example, if someone marries under false pretenses, if someone tells you their name is John Smith and that's not their name, then the marriage can be annulled. Also, if someone did not give consent. In Guyana, you can be 16 and get married, but you need the consent of your parents. If someone did not get consent, if you're underage, then the marriage can be annulled. And then if you are younger than 16, if you're 13, 14, you do not have the right to give consent because you are a minor and the law does not recognize such a marriage. So an annulment can be done in that case. Also in the case of incest, because we cannot be married to our family members. So these are all grounds for annulment, which is a different concept from a divorce, because the courts will not recognize the marriage as legal if it does not meet certain criteria. And then our second type of union has to do with the common law or consensual marriage. Common law or consensual marriage. In this type of union, partners live together by mutual agreement without being legally married. And in Guyana, we may say two persons are living home. That is an example of a common law union. Or if you take up somebody and you go and go live with them, or you make a life with somebody and you're not legally married, then we say those persons are part of a common law or consensual union. This union is very popular in the Caribbean, and in many cases, partners perform the same roles and functions as if they were married. Our third type of union has to do with the visiting relationship. And the visiting relationship is characterized by partners living in separate locations but operating as a family. One partner may live with the children as a single parent or part of an extended family arrangement. The other partner may live alone or also be part of an extended family arrangement. So what are some kinds of situations do you think that would result in a visiting relationship? Yes, you're correct. Sometimes both partners, they love each other, they want to be with each other, but they're not ready to take that bold step of marriage. They're not ready to take that bold step of marriage, which is legally binding. So that is why they could be in a visiting relationship, whereby the child lives with one partner and the other partner comes and visits. Now, another situation that could result in a visiting relationship could be as a result of finances or economic instabilities. For example, these two parents or these two partners cannot afford to have their own household or to have their own abode or dwelling, and as such, they decide to stay living with their own parents or by themselves or with their extended families until they're financially stable or able to form a nuclear family or to live on their own. Now, another type of family found in the Caribbean is the outside family. And this family type is not what we would consider to be ideal. And not many persons aspire to be a part of this family. And I'll tell you why. Now, the outside family occurs when the man has a second family with a female other than his wife. Yes, right away we can think of the drama that's associated with this kind of family. By law, however, he may only legally marry one woman at a time. By law, he may only legally marry one woman at a time. Recently in Guyana, if you were following the news, you would have heard that a man was charged for marrying two women at the same time. Yes. Do you know why? Because he thought that his first wife had given him a divorce, but that was not the case. And he legally married someone else, so he was charged for that crime. Yes. And this type of family can be very stressful to all parties involved, because usually not everyone is in consensus with this type of family, right? Now we will be looking at forms of marriage. Yes, there are different forms of marriage in the Caribbean and around the world. Now in the Caribbean, people are only allowed to legally marry one person at a time, and that system is called monogamy. Monogamy means you are only allowed to marry one person at a time. You cannot be legally married to 2 or 3 women at a time. Great, monogamy. And if we look at the prefix mono, mono means one. Yes, mono means one. So monogamy means one woman or one wife at a time. You want to marry somebody else, you need to divorce your first wife before you can do that. In places where it is legal, if an individual marries more than one person, this is called polygamy. That's the term. If you are allowed to marry more than one person legally, the term is called polygamy. And poly, P-O-L-Y, the prefix means many. When we think of a polygon, my math students, what comes to mind when you think of a polygon? You think of a plane figure with multiple sides, with many sides. And similarly, in polygamy, you can be married to more than one person. Now, polygamy takes 2 forms. We have polyandry, whereby a woman marries more than one man at the same time. A woman marries more than one man at the same time. That is called polyandry. And polygyny is where a man marries more than one woman at the same time. And in many societies in the world, polygyny is much more common in terms of polygamy, whereby men may have several wives. Do you remember I spoke to you about a crime that is committed when you illegally marry more than one person at the same time? What do you think that is called? The term for that is called bigamy. B-I-G-A-M-Y. Bigamy is whereby you marry 2 persons or more at the same time, and it is not legally recognized. In some religions, polygamy is permissible, meaning it is allowed. And in many Islamic countries where there is Sharia law, you'll find that polygamy is allowed. However, there are certain criteria for polygamy. And I'll read you an excerpt from the Holy Quran. And it says, "And if you fear that you cannot act equitably towards orphans, then marry such women as seem good to you, 2 and 3 and 4. But if you fear that you will not do justice between them, then marry only one or what your right hand possesses. This is more proper. Thus, it is more likely that you will not do injustice." Yes, so in some countries, polygamy is allowed, but under certain situations or conditions. You can't say you want to have multiple wives and you're struggling to make your one wife happy or to provide for her. So only unless you have the financial means and you know that you can treat them equally, then you are free to go ahead and marry multiple women. Also, in some cultures, if the first wife cannot bear a son, if she's suffering from infertility, then a man may be allowed to marry another woman as well. I have some quick questions for you. What are two similarities and two differences between the practice of polygamy and that of having an outside marriage? What are two similarities with polygamy and having an outside marriage? Well, in both polygamy and an outside marriage, there is at least one wife. That is similar. There is at least one wife. And another similarity could be that there is going to be some competition, and a man is going to take responsibility for multiple wives. He has to provide for all of them financially and give them moral and emotional support as well. What is a difference now between polygamy and an outside marriage? Well, an outside marriage is not legally recognized, but polygamy in many places is legally recognized, and that's the difference. I would also like to add, as I'm wrapping up, that in Guyana and in many places in the Caribbean, a common law union is recognized in certain situations. For example, if you have been living together with your partner in a common law union for 5 years or more, then you are entitled to certain benefits. So for example, if your spouse has died, if your male partner has died and you're part of a common law relationship, then the law recognizes you as his legal spouse. The law will recognize you as his legal spouse, and you will get benefit as a widow. Or if your female partner has died, you will get benefits as if you are a widower. So we do find that those people who live in common law relationships may not necessarily want to get married, right? And while we have all these kinds of different unions in the Caribbean, like I said, the outside marriage is not the ideal type, and not everyone agrees to that situation. So therefore, we can say if the wife doesn't agree to it, the husband would have committed infidelity, or what we say, adultery. He's cheating on his wife. In Guyana, such a man, we may say he's a sweet man. He has many women. If you're in Jamaica, you might say he's a gallus. He loves many women. So you see, the Caribbean, we have different kinds of family types, different kinds of unions, and that is what makes the Caribbean so diverse and so interesting. It's now time for us to delve into some multiple choice questions. Yes, I am here to test your knowledge on what we've just learned and what we've learned in our previous session on the family. And the first multiple choice question for you is, the practice of only being married to one man or woman is called, is it polygamy? Is it polyandry? Or is it polygyny? Or is it monogamy or monogamy? Which one is it? Look at the choices, look at the words. What stands out in that question? Yes, if you think that the first three answers all start with the word poly, P-O-L-Y, then that refers to many, because the prefix poly means many. And the question is asking us about being married to just one man or one woman. So the obvious choice there would be monogamy, being married to one man or one woman. And polyandry and polygyny are actually forms of polygamy. Polygamy is having multiple partners who you're married to. And polyandry is whereby a wife or a woman has many husbands. And polygyny is whereby a man may have several wives. And that is not what the question is asking. Our third multiple choice question. John is born into a large family. Which positive characteristic is John most likely to experience? Is it A, sibling rivalry, which will teach him to develop lack of forgiveness? Is it B, poor intellectual development? Or is it C, more responsibilities at home, which will help him grow in self-confidence and maturity? Or perhaps it is D, only focuses on himself and not on the others around him. So these are all different characteristics John could develop. However, the question specifically asks us for a positive characteristic, which is a quality that is positive, a quality that is considered to be good. Let us look at the choices again. Sibling rivalry. Is it good for you to always be fighting with your siblings and then you choose not to forgive them? No, that would not be considered as a positive quality. What about B? Poor intellectual development. If you're not doing well academically because you're part of a large family, is that a good quality? Is that positive? Of course not. And usually children can do good in extended families because you have older siblings who may teach you new things. So you have more support. So not B. What about more responsibilities at home? Some of us may not see this as being very positive, but this statement goes on. It says more responsibilities at home, which will help him grow in self-confidence and maturity. And to me, that sounds like a very positive characteristic. But let's not get carried away just yet. Let's look at what D says. D says only focuses on himself and not on others. That sounds to me that John is being very selfish, not a good characteristic. So we're going to go back to C and stick with C as the correct answer. More responsibilities at home, which will help him grow in self-confidence. When children have an opportunity to work at home, to do chores, they become very independent, they're more mature, and they develop socially. Our next group of questions are true or false statements. So we have to decide which statements are true and which are false. Pretty simple, right? Well, let's get into it. The first one. In the Caribbean, polygamy is legal. Is that true or is that false? Of course, to answer such a question, you need to know what polygamy means. And we said it means being married to more than one partner or having many wives or many husbands. And is that legal in the Caribbean? Do you know anybody who has 2 wives or 2 husbands? No, it is not legal in the Caribbean. So we will say that statement is false. Let's look at number 2. A married person who is legally separated from his or her spouse can go ahead and get married to someone else. Is that true? If you're legally separated, I'm separated from my wife, can I go ahead and get married to someone else? Can I do that? Of course not. Yes, you cannot get married to someone else if you're legally separated. What is the process? What should be done? Yes, you must get a divorce first before you can marry someone else if you were married before. And lastly, in Guyana, persons in common law unions for 5 years or more will receive the same privileges as a widow or a widower when their partner has died without making a will. Can that be done in Guyana? If you have a partner has died and you're not legally married, as a widow or widower, will you get certain financial benefits? Will you be able to own property? Will that be done in such a case? The answer is yes. So that statement is true because the law in Guyana recognizes common law unions as long as you've been living with someone for 5 years or more. I hope you found this session very informative and do keep safe until next time.